Hi, I'm Adam Peltzman, and you're watching a podcast where nostalgia comes alive. It's Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. Roll it!
Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. Join Jake and his friends on a journey through pop culture of the past, where they interview professionals in the worlds of acting, directing, writing, puppeteering, and so much more. Who will they be chatting with today? Find out in this Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode.
Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. Happy here with us, thank you for joining. I'm your host, Jake Duffenball. Me today, of course, our co-hosts, Chris Bixby and Matt Bingle. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
I'm good. Hi, everybody. How are you, Jake?
I'm doing great, Matt. Thank you for asking. What do we have for today?
Today's guest is a television writer and producer. He's written for various shows for Nickelodeon over the years, including Backyardigans, Wonder Pets, Winx Club, among many, many others, creating and executive producing for Wallykazam and the Netflix series Go Dog Go. But most of you will know him as a head writer for Blue's Clues when he started back in 1997. He's written quite a few episodes of the show, but he's also the voice of Green Puppy.
Oh,
This
my
should
God.
get really... Yeah.
You've done your homework. Wow.
Yes, I have. Please welcome our special guest. Please welcome Mr. Adam Peltzman. Welcome, Adam. Happy to have you here.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you for that intro. I'm like, oh yeah, that, right.
Nice. Happy to have you here.
We're delighted to have you. So to kick this off, even though I kind of introduced you a little bit, could you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, I mean, you summed it up pretty good. I've been writing kids TV for a few decades now, and yet, like you said, it did sort of start back in the Blue's Clues days, and we could certainly talk about that. Since the early days of writing and then head writing, which was a nice next step, got a chance to pitch and develop shows. So in recent years, doing more of show creation and show running. Yeah, what else do you want to know? I'm an open book.
Wonderful to hear that. So, now, I'm kind of curious. So, what was your childhood like, and how did you grow up?
Super boring. No, it was great. I mean, boring is good, right? When it comes to a childhood, it was a lovely childhood. I grew up in a town called Westboro, Massachusetts. My family, they're New Yorkers, and I was born in New York, but mostly grew up in central Massachusetts. Kind of a typical suburban childhood, Little League, hanging out in the neighborhood, watching a lot of TV, and just hanging out with friends. And as I got a little bit older, kind of into high school years, I started to get more into various creative pursuits, like acting and writing, and theater was just kind of what I really enjoyed doing at that point. In my youth, kind of playing sports but poorly, and watching sports quite well. I was really good at watching them. So yeah, that's kind of the broad strokes. Nothing wildly eventful.
So, what inspired you to want to have a career in writing? Did you always want to be a writer?
I don't recall always wanting to be a writer. I always enjoyed entertainment and comedy. Once I did hit high school, I think I started to get interested in writing. I wrote a play in high school and directed it with a friend. And that really kind of got me interested in writing for an audience. But I also enjoyed writing, short stories and personal essays and that kind of thing. But I went off to college I didn't have like a single pointed goal or pursuit. And, I didn't know I was going to do X, Y, or Z. I kind of explored a lot of things in college, continued to explore writing quite a bit. I did a lot of improv comedy in college as well. And so I think those experiences and kind of figuring out what makes me tick and understanding I like writing for an audience. I like writing creatively. I also developed a little bit of an interest during my college years in education and through tutoring and a little bit of teaching. And so kids TV emerged kind of as this possible amalgam of those interests, something where I could write, I could entertain, and potentially make an impact or, help kids learn and, that kind of thing.
Nice.
That's awesome. So, of course, early on in your career, you worked on Nick Jr.'s series Blue's Clues as a writer and head writer. How do you kind of first began working on that show?
Yeah, it was definitely a situation of being in the right place at the right time. Just before that, I'd graduated college, as I mentioned, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but whenever I would hear about anything in the world of kids TV, it would spark some interest. I had an opportunity before Blue's Clues, which was very fortuitous. Through basically, I had a girlfriend at the time who's had a family friend that knew me pretty well and knew what I was interested in, and he gave me a call. He said, I just had lunch with somebody in development at Scholastic that's looking to make this show. It's about this, I think it was about a kid and an alligator traveling cross country, getting into wild adventures, and they wanted it to be both educational but very, very funny. And he asked me if I had like a spec script that I could submit, and I didn't even know what that was. So I ended up sort of unconventionally writing up a sample of that idea basically, and I had so much fun doing it, and it kind of showed me that it was the kind of thing I wanted to do. And I got hired actually to do some development work on that. So it was some lucky early work right out of the gate. And so then when Blue's Clues was hiring for its second season, they were staffing up various positions, including a writing coordinator position. So I had that sample work to show to prove that I was interested in this area, and that got me through the door. And I think and I tell a lot of, I meet with a lot of writers that are starting out. If you can get your hands on a writing coordinator, writing assistant type job, it's the absolute best way to learn, because you're just a fly in the wall to all creative conversations. And with Blue's Clues, it was a crash course in not only the show but the audience, because that show was so dedicated to really serving that very specific audience. And they
Right.
also they researched, as I'm sure you guys know, they researched everything exhaustively. They would break down each script into a storybook, bring that storybook into a preschool, write down everything kids said. I mean, because it's an interactive show, that was pretty crucial to understanding if those interactions with Steve would work. So even as the writing coordinator, before I got the chance to write, I was sitting there in preschools watching scripts get tested out, and realizing a little bit that my ideas about writing for kids were a little bit different than the reality where the rubber hits the road, where you're actually writing something for kids. And I got a chance because the show was it had just started to become a hit, but it was early and it was growing. There was really opportunity, and so I had a chance pretty early on to write a script, to chip in a script, or at least to try my hand at one, which is, again, extremely fortuitous at that early stage of my career. And I remember it was both very exciting and humbling, because, like I said, you bring that story into a preschool, and I think, oh, my jokes are hilarious. These kids are gonna love it, and then to watch the jokes just fly over their head because they were maybe not literal or concrete enough. Again, a great crash course in learning about a really young audience, and having to adjust my sensibilities to match.
Nice.
Absolutely. I mean, Angela and Tracy and Todd, you're creating the show. Oh my gosh,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I realized at
they're wonderful.
yeah, of course. I mean, and just how fortunate I was to be in that environment. But really, I mean, everybody, I think most people, not all, but most people working on that show, it was probably their first show, most of them. And so
Mm,
everybody's learning kind of as they go.
yeah.
And so you have this environment where people are experimenting and trying things. Nobody's an expert. And I think that creates a really fun creative energy. And I think also, again, in that category of not realizing how good we had it, everything was kind of under one roof in New York. You had this really young team, and artists, animators, educators, writers. And it's, these days, shows I've worked on in recent years, you know, some of it's remote or some of it's small teams and then some outsourcing or a studio here, a studio there. This was like a real collective experience. And yeah, like you said, the creators really set just an incredible tone.
Absolutely. So overall, do you have any favorite Blue's Clues episodes that you got to write?
Wow, that's a really good question. I liked so many of them. I don't know if any one particular pops out. For some reason, one that's coming to my mind just because I remember writing it was, I think it was called What's So Funny, where it was all about kind of, again, that was part of that learning process of what makes a preschooler laugh. And I don't remember what my initial pitch for the beginning was, but I remember Angela kind of saying to me, you
Oh,
know,
yeah, that episode. Yeah, I remember that one.
yeah. I remember because yeah, Steve had a sock puppet and he had a lot of fun with that one. And
Oh
I
yeah.
remember Angela
Yeah.
saying that she said, you know, your opening is funny, but to a preschooler, like, you know, funny can be something as simple as you know, a shoe on your head. And I remember thinking, you know, I was like, my comedy has to be way more sophisticated. I'm going to try something else. And then we tried something that did not work in research. And then, so if you watch that episode, Steve comes to the door with a shoe on his head because if it works, it works. You know, because you really had to set the tone in that one of like what makes you laugh. So that one was fun. I remember doing one where they were putting on a play, which was fun. They all kind of yeah. I just remember kind of they made up their own play and they put it on and
Oh,
uh
Blues Play.
Blues.
Yeah,
That's
it's
the one.
a
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
cafe one that was fun where they were waiting.
Yeah,
Oh,
Blues
Cafe
Cafe.
Blue.
Oh,
Yeah.
you
Blue,
guys are
yeah.
super fans. My gosh, you probably
Yeah.
remember them better than I
Yeah.
do.
Well, of course.
But
And you also got to write one of, I'd say, the most well-known episodes of the show, Steve Goes to College.
yeah, so that was a real collaboration with Angela, who, you know, that was like her initial idea. And you know, it's funny. Did you watch that as it came on? Is that
I think I was probably too young. Well,
probably
I mean, I was born, but I was like really little, so
I
Yeah.
mean, I was born in 2004, so it was so
So he
that's
missed it by a few years.
yeah. So of
yeah.
course
least
I
that episode
watched
anyway.
episode like through a DVD that has
Yeah.
that episode on it. So that's kind of how I discovered
it's such a
myself.
good episode, but also, kind of bittersweet and
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
emotional
Yeah,
because
so
To
the
many Blues Clues fans that are so used to Steve, and then
yeah.
Donovan as as a Joe taking over. As
yeah.
it's such a huge thing for us to watch. Growing up.
Yeah, it was a big thing. The thing about that, which is Nickelodeon kind of changed the parameters a little bit late. I mean, you know, I don't blame them. It's a
Right.
program decision that they had to make because the original conceit was that there would be 3 episodes that are aired in successive weeks, right? So you'd get to know Joe a little bit in the first one. In the middle one, you'd hang out with Joe a little bit. We actually modeled it. I think at the time we were working with Laura Brown, who's this great preschool educator and consultant on media. And she really helped us understand that because we wanted to talk to her about how to kind of break this news to kids. And she used the model of introducing a kid to a new babysitter. You know, she said, well, initially the kid just meets the babysitter. So it might just be a quick hello. Then the parent is still there, but the babysitter's kind of taking the lead and the parent's kind of there. And then finally, the parent's there at the beginning and then leaves. You know, if you could structure it that way, she said, like it might really help. And so the initial idea was that those 3 episodes would air separately, which but
Right.
then
Yeah.
you know, and maybe the last one would have been the primetime one, but by then kids already knew the deal. But then Nickelodeon changed it to be this one big event where you put all together. And I remember it's funny because I think we watched it in a bar, which makes no sense for that. But I think, you know, the
It's
crew was
interesting.
together
Oh, that's
watching.
funny.
And I remember thinking if I knew this was going to be like one event, we would have gone with something much shorter. And that it just wasn't designed for the package that it was in. But you know, so I think that's why for a lot of kids it felt abrupt because it was this big event that they were told, tune in for this thing, and then in that thing they find out, oh, Steve's leaving. Whereas the way it was designed, it was much more it was a kinder design, I think. So I don't know if you knew that little backstory, but
Interesting.
Right.
That's interesting. I knew about the primetime special though, and like combined 3 into 1.
Yeah,
yeah,
me too.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many wonderful episodes that the three of us, I mean, so many other Blue's Clues fans might remember
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
episodes that you got to road. Because what I'm thinking of right now is Blue's Big Pajama Party.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
And the one episode where Joe gets a clue, which is one of those episodes that Steve was still there, kind of like it was like
Oh yeah, that was one of the 3 in 1 we were talking
That
about.
was wasn't that the middle one? I think, yeah.
yeah, it was.
A long time
Oh
ago.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, there's
Um,
also the 100th episode celebration,
That was
which
a
was
fun
cool. That was
one.
the one. That was the one I think where
Talk show, yeah.
Steve got to come back as like a brief little cameo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I believe that was like a talk show. I believe we had a joke where Mr. Salt said something like, "I'm only human." I don't know. I maybe that cut, but I just remember.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense because Mr. Saul
Thanks,
was
bro.
kind of like that in the actual
Yeah.
video.
Yeah. Wow, I really appreciate you're bringing me back. I mean, this is nostalgia for me now because there's some of these episodes I haven't really thought about in a while, but it's cool to hear about this.
Nice.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. A Blues First Holiday.
First
Yeah.
holiday that was a really good one.
Where it's an episode where basically like everyone where Donovan was Joe during that point. It's like where everyone was like watching kind of like a home movie where like as Steve as him as like
Yeah.
being little how he first met Blue.
Oh my God, did I write that? Did it say I wrote?
Yeah.
Wow, I did.
Yeah, you
Boy,
did.
I sure remember that. No, I don't. I don't
I mean,
recall writing that.
that's a long time ago. So
It's funny if you like sat me down and said name all the Blue's Clues episodes you wrote, I would not have come up with that one. But that's right. That one was really sweet. Yeah.
oh, it's a very interesting one. And Joe's Clues.
Joe's Clues
Yeah.
was a
And
lot
a
of
soccer
good
practice. Yeah, I mean, there's so many.
Yeah, I remember I went to an actual preschool soccer practice to figure out how to write that one.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
That's
interesting.
great.
Wow.
Nice.
That's cool. One of my favorites that you wrote was Blue's Big Mystery. That was Periwinkle's first episode. I think.
Yeah, right.
That
Similar
was,
to it.
yes.
How about that one?
I have a really good old friend. We're still friends, and we were friends in high school. And when we were coming, I mean, obviously, I think the idea for Periwinkle came from Angela, but when we were kind of filling out his personality, I was somewhat basing it on my old friend Pete. And to this day, Pete mentions this when he meets new people. But Pete was an only child. He loves attention, loves magic tricks. So those are some of the qualities in Periwinkle that we were playing with. And so
Nice.
shout out to Pete.
Oh, nice.
That's nice.
That's where the magic tricks came from. Interesting. So
Yeah, exactly.
I'm kind of curious, who were some of your favorite characters you got to write for?
Oh my gosh. Well, Periwinkle was fun. I think Steve, I really loved the way that Steve could kind of both be at the level of the kid, but also
As wonderness, and
Yes.
but as him being like a little silly and a little sarcastic or something like that.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but also bring a little wink to the adults. And I don't it's and I think he responded to some of those winks that were embedded a little bit in my script. So I think that was a fun interplay. Of course, also like writing for Donovan was a blast because he brought so
Oh, I
much,
love Donovan.
yeah, so much energy and playfulness.
Great guys.
Yeah, it was fun to write for. Again, I'm just trying to remember. I think it was fun to write for Salt and Pepper because they
Oh yeah.
Oh
they were
yeah.
They're always funny.
funny little duo. I'm sure I'll think I've written a lot of shows since then, but yeah, I did write a lot of Blue's Clues, so it was such a fun show to do.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, of course, speaking of characters, you actually got to voice the character Green Puppy. What was it kind of getting to voice her like?
What was it? Well, it's so funny. I remember. I'm trying to remember how it came about, but I was I worked alongside at Blue's Clues one of my old friends from college, actually, Quaylee Chanda.
Oh yeah.
And you know, we both like she started directing episodes when I started writing episodes, and then she became the voice of Magenta. She barked in a meeting, and they were like, "You're Magenta, you're wonderful." And I was like, "Wow, you could just bark in a meeting and get to be a dog. This is fantastic." So I think we were doing a script read on the green puppy thing, and I barked and it was magic. I don't know. I think I said, Angela, what if the voice is something like that? Now, of course, it's a very deep male voice. And you're right, it was a girl character. But you know, cool. Yeah, so I don't know. It's only the super fans that really know who Green Puppy is. Though I do somewhere, not here, I have like they almost made a toy of Green Puppy, but they didn't. But I have like the one prototype of it. It's kind of cool.
Oh,
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Nice.
I wish I had it. I don't think I
Yeah, I
do.
remember. I still remember. Some of the episodes like Green Puppy appeared. It's been a while, but oh my gosh.
I have a
It's such-
writer friend that still he just calls me Green Puppy like in an email or something. So it's kind of fun.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. I
He didn't
love
even
that.
he didn't even work on Blue's Clues. It's just how he identifies me.
that's great.
That's funny. Speaking of Green Puppy, I'm sure a lot of Blue's Clues fans are wondering, is it fine we can hear a little bit of Green Puppy?
Oh, you want to hear a little bit? Oh gosh, man.
Don't worry.
Wow. It's embarrassing how unprofessional of a voice it is. What was it? Kind of like wow, wow, wow. It was better than that. I don't think that I'm not doing it justice. But I'll work on it and get back to you if that's all right. I've done other voices on other shows since then with a little more nuance, but
Right.
it was really just a bow, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, then that was just kind of a little side thing.
And
Yeah,
again, they
yeah,
all kind of were like a little bow. They all kind of
Yeah.
were.
Yeah, and
It's-
then the post production people can just add the same bow into this. If Joe or Steve or Joe got hi
yeah.
Green Puppy, or so now we don't have to record just for those type of
the same
moments.
bows over and over again.
Well, I think usually you
Right.
would do it for each episode it showed up in, because each bow has so much, art and originality in it. No, I don't know. But yeah, I'm just joking.
So another Nick Jr. series you were writer and head writer on was the Backyardigans. What was it like
Yes.
working on that?
That was awesome. So that came shortly after Blue's Clues, and it was a nice contrast in terms of, still for the preschool audience and still very much like grounded in understanding and respecting that audience, but it's just a different take on it. Like, Blue's Clues is more explicitly educational and interactive, and Backyardigans had some talk to camera type stuff, but it was mostly about whimsy and story and adventure and music and and just kind of like what's the most fun you can have in this 22 minutes and which really fun, like a total other way to use your brain and we got to tell a lot of really fun and inventive stories. It was amazing and a career highlight to work with Janice Burgess for all those years. Yeah, she's just incredible. She sadly passed away a couple months ago, which was definitely a hard hit in our community. But Janice learned a ton from Janice, and we had a lot of laughs sitting around that table thinking up stories. And so and we got to do fun stuff. Like Janice and I collaborated also on a stage show.
Wow.
It was based on one of the hour-long specials that I wrote, The Tale of the Mighty Knights. And so we got to kind of turn that into a musical. Got to sit in Madison Square Garden and watch kids yelling at the stage and excited. So that,
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
That is
some really
awesome.
fun experiences. And I remember sitting in all these great lyric meetings, and because the script writers on that show would write lyrics, and they wouldn't always stay in the show, but sometimes often they would. And So you almost had to sort of sell your lyrics to the composer. You had to read them out loud and made sure that
Right.
they scan and make sure they
It's
rhyme.
like sounded like
Yeah.
right, and any mix and any
Because
sense
when you read
to the
lyrics out
audience.
loud, because what you weren't allowed to do in those meetings is sing them. Just be like, this is the tune I had in my head. Because the composer's like, well, we're not going to do the tune you had in your head. We're going to do an original tune. So they had to really work out loud as lyrics. Like you said, they had to sound right. They had to kind of, scan properly. And you'd know sitting there in a meeting reading it out loud if you had a clunker or if you had a pretty good lyric. And so that was, speaking about using another part of your brain, I think to learn to write lyrics was really interesting as well for that.
Yeah. Of course, except Blues Clues and all. Backyardigans is another one of our favorite shows
Oh,
growing
that's
up
great.
too. It's so wonderful. Janice, rest her soul, because
Yes.
back the creation of the show wouldn't be show what it is if it wasn't for her.
Oh, it was her vision, top to bottom. It was
Oh yeah.
really based on her memories of her own childhood, but it was also very much infused with just the things that she loved and cared about, such as she loved action movies, right? So what Janice would do is stay up late at night and watch action movies. So when we're trying to crack a story, she'd say, "Oh, it's kind of like Die Hard," or and she'd bring in an action sequence from Murder on the Orient Express or something like that.
Yeah, because the
And
Backyardigans had a lot of action focused
Oh yeah.
episodes.
yeah, it's really
Right.
each episode was kind of its own little genre, right? You do a superhero episode, a spy episode, an old knights type episode, or so yeah, so I think I thought it was really cool as a sort of still an up and coming writer and someone who might want to make their own show one day, just to see somebody bring to a show the thing she loved music, she loved working with certain musicians, and so everything was kind of like it was a show that was about her passions and sharing those with an audience, and it really hit with a really big audience. So it was yeah, a very cool experience.
Nice.
Awesome. So you also wrote a number of episodes for the Wonder Pets, another favorite Nick Judy show of ours. What was working on that like?
That was great. I mean, that was as a freelancer. That show was based in Little Airplane Productions in New York City, and I was in New York at the time. And so, it was kind of it probably came at a time when I wasn't head writing a show, so I was working on multiple projects. And so they'd say, "Hey, Adam, you want to write one about, the Three Little Pigs?" And I'd come in for a little meeting and chat with the head writer, chat with the executive producer, we'd kick around ideas, and then I'd go back and write an outline. So it was a lot of fun, and that was another kind of music-based show where you got to different kinds of lyrics, right? There was more operatic in that you might write a lyric that expressed emotion, or there might be a couple lines that rhyme, but it wasn't about writing like two verses and a chorus. It was more about embedding musical moments within. I think one thing I remember they had us do, which was unique, I think, for a process, was I think they had you sing your script basically, which was a humbling experience. But you had to sort of sing it so that their team would understand how you were hearing it. Obviously, they didn't necessarily compose to exactly how you sung it into a voice memo, or who knows what we were recording with at that point. But I remember that being kind of a quirky, interesting part of the process. I remember also I was very excited because I thought I was going to get my dog onto the show, because they used photographs of real animals to create the characters. And so, I was in the office one day. I'm like, I got a cute dog. You might really, really, want to hire my dog. And so they're like, "Oh, you wrote that episode where there's a dog at the end. Bring her in." I said, "Oh, it's amazing." It took Sandy on a road trip. We were living in Brooklyn. We went into Manhattan, put her in a cab. They shot her. He did this photo shoot from all these different angles. Big day for Sandy, big day for me. A long while later, I said, "Hey, did that episode ever get finished?" They said, "Oh yeah, that sure did." And they sent it along. And myself and my wife and my dog sat there and watched it to the end, when we realized my dog had been replaced by another dog who is I think the production team I think the production team forgot. And it
Oh.
was probably a sizing thing. It was not an acting thing. My dog was an incredible actor. I think it was it must have been some other technical reason. However, a few years later, when I was writing and producing, not to fast forward through our interview, but Electric Company, we did a dog-based episode, and my dog Sandy got to be in that episode in a live
Oh,
action
cool.
Oh
show.
Nice.
She did great. People were so proud of her on set. It was really fun. So
That's cool.
redemption for the dog that was cut out of
Wow.
the cartoon, you know?
Electric Company, yeah.
Nice.
That's cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So, of course, you also got to write some episodes of Bubble Guppies during the first season. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I was head writer on that first season, and it was an interesting season. It was kind of, sometimes first seasons are all about like figuring out exactly what the show is. And
Yeah.
yeah, I remember it started really as like they were gonna go kind of hardcore laugh-in variety show, which still definitely maintained elements of that. But I think over the course of the season, we realized there needed to be a little bit more of a through line narrative. So we kind of figured out how to get that in. And yeah, it was super fun to work, because so Robert and Johnny, the creators, as I'm sure you guys know, are also producers on the Backyardigans, so that's how I got to know them. And they're just such funny, inventive creators. So it was really fun to kind of like, go into the cartoon lab and figure out what this, they wanted to make something pretty unique, have a pretty unique structure all of its own. And so I feel like a lot of our season was trial and error and trying to figure out exactly what worked. And obviously something good came out of it, because that show really ran a long time, and it was a favorite of a lot of kids. So yeah, I had a fun year working with them.
Oh yeah, Bubble
Nice.
Guppies is another wonderful show. I mean, I remember watching most of the first season. I mean, I did watch a little bit of the second season, but that's how much I actually did grow up watching Bubble Guppies. But oh my gosh, it was a great show.
Yeah, really, they really did a wonderful job with that.
Absolutely.
They certainly did. So, staying on Nickelodeon, what was it like writing for the Peter Rabbit series?
Great series. I think I only wrote one episode, like as a freelancer. And it was a good experience, but it wasn't one of these experiences that lasted a long amount of time. I remember it was a really sharp creative team, and I remember being very impressed with the way that those episodes came out, and so it was really good storytelling. It was good fun to be a part of it. But I don't have too many lasting memories of that one 11-minute script. But
Ah,
yeah.
Hmm.
I mean,
so
because you only got to like involve just a little tiny bit, even just one episode. So that makes
Just one.
total sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
So now moving on to Wallykazam. So now
Yeah.
we've talked about writing for all these shows, and now you finally get to create a show for them. What kind of went into pitching the show and creating Wallykazam?
Yeah, at Nickelodeon was looking for a show with a literacy curriculum. That was kind of, and it started with shorts. They wanted various creators to pitch ideas for shorts. And so I came up with this. I had made actually a literacy-based pilot for Nickelodeon years before that didn't get to a green light, but I learned a lot from it. And in doing this one, I thought, well, how can you make literacy really dynamic for this audience? Because literacy, it's symbolic, it's words symbolizing something else. And one thing I got to know about the audience over the years is they like things that are dynamic and concrete and visual. So the initial spark was like, is there a way to take a word and make something exciting happen on screen, right? So that's where the idea came, that what if there's this kid in this kind of fantastical land, has a stick, and when the right word gets triggered, something magical happens. And when we made the shorts, Nickelodeon, I intentionally stayed away from phonics because I thought it might narrow the ability of the show to have an international appeal, because if you're really tied into the spelling of a certain word, meaning a certain thing, it's not going to work in translation. So I was playing around with the idea of vocabulary. So what happens if I use the word enormous? What happens? Wow, it made this ball from this big to this, that big. So the short, which I think was like a 4 or 5 minute short, had that kind of curriculum, and it was really fun and playful. I don't think his name was Wally back then. The name went through some changes. But then as they became interested in it as a longer series, they really wanted to crack the idea of phonics, despite the fact that everybody agreed it might limit the show's ability to play internationally. Because, as you'll remember in an episode, all the magic words today start with the letter B and the bus sound. So you're seeing a ball and you're seeing something bounce and you're hearing a burp. And so if you translate that into any other language, the visuals aren't going to match the words and it's just not going to work. So everybody's kind of on board with that. So at that point, it was kind of just owning that conceit of, and it helped to give the magic words a rule, because otherwise it's wide open. This kid can make anything happen with this stick. But if he's stuck within this rule of all the words have to start with the sh sound or the b sound or end with a certain sound or rhyme with a certain sound, you're forcing the character and the kids to think about phonics, because it's the only thing that is moving the story forward, and it's also what's leading to the comedic moments and the dynamic moments. So it kind of became this little puzzle and little game of how do you write an episode that's all about a certain phonetic sound. And sometimes we would start with that, like we would start with, all right, we know we want to do a CH episode, but let's start writing out words and then let's thread a story that has to do with those words. Sometimes it would work the other way. You'd have an idea for a story and you'd say, okay, well, what words, what phonemic idea should we pair with it? So, yeah, it was, I had a ton of fun working on that show, learned a lot, worked with an amazing team of people, and started to learn what happens beyond just a script getting delivered. I mean, something like the Backyardigans, I would turn in a script and I'd kind of be done, and then I would see it like 10 months later and think, oh, they did an amazing job. But when you're producing a show beginning to end, you start to understand what all the creative decisions that go into every step and how you get it from what's in your head to what's on the screen, and how those creative collaborations are really at the heart of it. So it opens up a whole other part of the work, really, which is translating a creative idea across different departments and across different professionals with different talents, and it's a cool process.
Nice.
Sounds like it to me. So, on Noggin, you wrote episodes for Miffy and Friends, which was a stop motion series.
Again,
What
this
went
is going to
into-
test my memory. It's going to test my memory because this was another like freelance thing. I think it was right after Blue's Clues. Gosh, I feel like the animation was already done and they needed oh man, I don't even remember. And I don't think I was writing stories as much as I was trying to write dialogue for existing animation and make it make sense.
Okay.
I think. And I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember exactly what went into that, but that would fall in the category of shorter projects that haven't made as much of an imprint on my memory. Or I guess you get to a certain age and certain things fall off the
Right.
memory.
I mean, if I remember Miffy and Friends, that even though you don't really remember as much how you kind of got involved, it was to kind of get to your memory. That was even though it was kind of like a kind of interstitial type of thing. It was a really cool show.
You guys are amazing. I'm so impressed by your fandom and your memory of these different things, and it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's remarkable.
Thank you.
Thank
Means a
you.
lot. So now you also got to write for a Nickelodeon series, Wings Club. What was the writing like?
So that was really that was sort of a gig that was kind of came out of my relationship and professional relationship with Janice, the Backyardigans creator. So she was running that show, and they had existing outlines I think that they just needed to become scripts. I collaborated on those with my wife Sarah, who is a writer and has done some stuff in the kids space, and we, she was like, she needed writers that could kind of take an approved story and bang out a script, and I think that's what I think we did a couple of those.
Nice.
If I remember correctly, there was like, it was an Italian company and creator, and they had a pretty expansive worldview, and a real kind of mythology to this thing. It was something as a freelancer you can't really make up your own stuff. You just have to kind of plug in. I think it's probably like writing a soap opera where somebody says, this is the storyline, and we just need somebody to write the script for this week's episode. So it was definitely kind of a quick hit. I remember at one point we thought we were being clever. We went off the outline a little bit. Because we studied the show a little bit, and we said, oh, this character would be good for this scene. And we put this character that we had seen in the previous script or something in the episode. And then we got our notes back. And we're like, please lose that character. He died last season. We're like, oh, okay, well, that's, we don't know what's going on. Yeah, that was my experience with that show. I never received a note like that, on a preschool show.
Interesting. So, let's see. So, moving on from your work with Nickelodeon and Nick Jr. and all those things, another educational series that you got to write for on PBS was Word World. What was writing for that like?
Again, I think that was just a one-off, but it was during the development of it, and that was a long, long time ago. I think that was before Backyardigans. Don Moody was developing that show, and I might have been one of the first, because he worked with a lot of writers. I think I might have been the first or one of the first, and I remember he had an office in downtown New York, and I'd go in there, we'd kick around ideas, and if I remember correctly, at that time, it was changing a lot what it was going to be. Like, I think at one point it was maybe going to be a puppet series, but then it sort of settled into animation, and they were considering different age demos. So that was really just kind of that process of finding the show a little bit and writing one episode. So it kind of falls a little into that category of, I think I remember, but yeah, because it was a while ago. I think it was, I remember enjoying the process on it. I don't have much to say about that one.
Yeah, Word World was a very unique kind of show because it was basically, they would spell out all these words and then they would combine and turn into these objects, like the word, like say the word table, it would like actually turn into a table, and things like that. It was a very unique kind of concept. I thought it was a really neat show.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
yeah,
kind of goes with
really.
that idea we were talking about with Wallykazam of literacy. You have to find a way to make it visual and make it concrete in order for this audience to really get interested in it. So I think they did a good job with that.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So, now, how did the show Odd Squad come about?
So Odd Squad, so I think I mentioned before, I had done a season of head writing on the Electric Company. And so I'd started to form a relationship with PBS. One of the writers I brought in on Electric Company was an old friend of mine, Tim McKeown, who has written a ton of wonderful shows. At the time, he was writing a lot of 6 to 11 for Disney and Cartoon Network. And so the thing about Tim and I is we went to the same high school. I'm a few years older.
Nice.
Yeah, we both did theater. We didn't know each other super well in high school, but we knew each other a little bit, and then we reconnected years later at a mutual friend's wedding. So we started to work together a little bit. And so PBS, I remember getting an email from PBS saying we're looking for a show for kids, I think it was like 5 to 8, that teaches math. So I had already had Wallykazam in development and it was moving along, but I was like, well, it could be really fun to think about this math show, but I don't think I can do it alone because of what's happening with Wallykazam. So I called Tim, and it turns out Tim had gotten the same exact email. So we decided to, that was fortuitous. So we started to kick around ideas for what we would do with a math show. And I mentioned before with Wallykazam, it's kind of the same process. You start to think, what is fun you know, about this topic that maybe kids associate with school. How do you make it dynamic? How do you make it fun? And I think we started to go down the road of like math oddities and mysteries, which kind of ultimately became just oddities and mysteries that were solved by math rather than just math abnormalities. But we we were talking a little bit about things we like in common, and we were talking about the idea of doing a live action show because we've both been working a lot in animation. We thought it would be fun to do more live action. Electric Company was live action, and I enjoyed that process. So we talked about things that we liked growing up, like the Naked Gun movies and Airplane, and that kind of like hyper serious tone, but ultimately very ridiculous. We thought would be a really fun tone to play in, and the idea of kids wearing suits and doing things that were aspirational and powerful. All those ideas kind of came together for this concept about an agency run by kids that investigates odd and unusual events. So, you know, it has a little X-Files, it has a little Men in Black, and it has some of the DNA of those goofy comedies. So yeah, that was the initial idea. We wrote up a pitch and shared it with PBS, and they liked it enough to commission a script. And we took one of our stories, we wrote a script. They liked that enough to commission us to actually produce a pilot. And we produced a pilot that looks very different from what you've seen on television, because we had to do something pretty quick and scrappy on a budget. We shot something in New York with some talented friends that we knew, and made this proof of concept pilot, which was super charming and fun. And then when we got a chance to blow it out into the series, we connected with Sinking Ship Entertainment, who's really incredible at live action production and also visual effects, and really knew how to take that concept and fully realize it. So that was the beginnings of what was a very long journey, and still a journey. I mean, there's still versions of Odd Squad that are unfolding. So it's been quite a ride.
Nice. And you also got to have a hand in writing the Odd Squad movie,
Yeah,
which
I
was
do.
fun. And what was that like?
Yeah, it's super fun. They wanted to do something that was a much bigger story. And so I got to collaborate with Tim and Mark DeAngelis, who's another one of the key writer producers, showrunners on Odd Squad. And yeah, and you know, I at the time of a lot of that early production, I was still in New York, working on Wallykazam, and Mark and Tim were in Toronto. So they were a little bit more, or at times a lot more hands-on with the production. I did get to go for some of the shooting of that. Got to meet Jack McBrayer a little bit, who played Weird Tom and was absolutely hilarious and wonderful. And yeah, we, you know, like everything with Odd Squad, we had a lot of laughs writing it, and beyond thrilled and impressed with the job that the cast and the production team did realizing that script. It really was a lot of fun. Came out great.
Nice.
Absolutely. So moving on to some of your other work on Disney Junior, you wrote for the series Octonauts, another show with a very unique concept. Could you kind of talk about what was like working on that?
It was great. I would put that in that like Wonder Pets category where I wrote a bunch, but it was all freelance. But it was I was always so impressed with how well thought out that series was and how well run it was. And it was done through, at the time it was, I think it started as Corian and then became Silvergate, and that became Sony. Anyway, they were based in New York, but I think the showrunner Stephanie was based in LA. And it was just kind of like you had to think there's so many species of fish, you know, and underwater creatures that it was that's what made it such a brilliant concept for a series, because there's no end to story ideas. If you could think of some cool fact that could then become the basis of a story, then you had an Octonaut story, which is probably why they made probably hundreds of them.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, sometimes it was hard to crack it, but once you got it, it was really like this really fun adventure series with these kind of hard driving stories. Hard driving for preschool and very at the same time very sweet. I think the first one I wrote was about the fact I think that a male jawfish keeps the jawfish eggs in its mouth until they gestate. And but then I think one of our characters accidentally patted him on the back and all the eggs went flying out of this poor dude's mouth. And then
Oh
they
wow.
had to go through the
I think I
oceans
remember that.
to,
Yeah.
yeah, to find
Oh
them.
no.
It's a good
But it was,
show.
and then once they got some of them, they stuffed them back into his mouth. So because he had jawfish eggs in his mouth. So yeah, I remember that one. There was a white shark one I remember. There was, yeah, we had our own version of Snakes on a Plane called Sea Snakes on an Octopod, I think. Yeah, but it was, it was always a pleasure to collaborate with that team because you knew it was in good hands. You knew that they would thoughtfully story edit it and thoughtfully produce it. And I have my daughter Franny is she just turned 7, but she's grown up on some of these shows.
Oh,
Like she went through serious Odd Squad phase. I mean, I'm sorry, Octonauts phase.
nice. So, recently you developed the Netflix series Go Dog Go, of course, based on
Yes.
the best-selling book. What went into developing that show?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was coming off of doing a couple of originals. So I almost had this idea in my head, oh, I don't know if I want to adapt another thing. I want to make it I love doing originals. But this was almost an opportunity to adapt something and do an original because, the book is so wonderful, but it doesn't have characters really in it. It just has dogs on the go. It doesn't have a real plot, and that's not a knock on the book. It's not really the point of the book. It's more of like this fun, early reader. Um, but what it does have is a real kind of very like fluid, silly, kind of oddball vibe to it that I really liked. It's just, why is there a dog playing tennis on a blimp? Nobody knows. Why is there just a hedge maze in this town? Or nobody explains why this lady comes up and says, "Do you like my hat?" So I mean, all these, why are there 15 dogs in a bed? It had this kind of nonsensicalness that also sort of made sense, and that was really what drew me to trying to think of, can I create a show that does have the traditional things of characters and storylines and a place, but also, you know, incorporate some of, like, try to make some of those things make sense. So I made like the main, there's that main spread in the book where all the dogs are in the bed and they're all sleeping except for one dog. And I thought, well, that's a clue. Maybe that one dog is my lead character. It's the dog with the most go in the town. And I came up with, I come from not too far from Boston, so I came up with the idea, well, we could set it in a town called Poston. And so
That's
you
funny.
start, and I was like, oh, the lady that says, "Do you like my hat?" She's got to be in the show. And then, of course, the question is there more to her character? And the answer was no. She only is interested in hats. And so it became this world where the theme of the show that emerged was community, really. And it was really just became about this community of dogs that has to find ways to collaborate and get along to solve problems. And my very original pitch to DreamWorks, because they were the company that reached out to me, was I said it's like The Simpsons, but for kids and with dogs. Like you'll have this family, but you'll also have this big, colorful community. You'll have this expanding cast of oddball characters. And Poston was sort of like a preschool Springfield. It's like as the show went on, you got to know more and more dogs. So that, I mean, working on that show is a total joy throughout. It was great to work with. We worked at DreamWorks, but also worked with Wildbrain was the main production company. I got to work with Paul Buckley, who's the composer that had also composed everything on Odd Squad and a ton of the songs on Wallykazam. And it had a real kind of lighthearted fun vibe, and it was just a fun show to make. And we've made, maybe there'll be more, I don't know, but we've made 40 half hours. Yeah, 40 half hours, I think. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely looking forward to more. If
Yes,
there is
Absolutely.
more, of course.
if there is more.
Right.
I will gladly make them for you. Get back to me in a couple years.
Sure. So, aside from Go Dog Go, could you share any projects you're currently working on, or at least that you're allowed to talk about?
Yeah, I don't think I'm actually allowed to go into any specifics. I am doing a lot of development, and kind of picking up on the theme of a lot of projects these days are kind of based on existing IP and books and other things. And so, well, I can't get into any specifics. I have had the opportunity to kind of work on some cool book adaptations recently, and
Oh, cool.
you know,
Nice.
development moves at the pace it moves at. So, I mean, I think like everything's moving forward, but at its own pace. And I don't know if it's going to move forward and get greenlit because it's still early days on some of these. But
Mhm.
it's been a lot of that, and plus definitely working on a few original concepts as well. And yeah, just happy to be continuing to think of new ideas. Hope to have something more specific to share down the line, but.
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot wait.
Cool.
Cannot wait for those.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, this last question that Jake is going to ask, we usually ask all of our guests. Go ahead, Jake.
Thank you, Matt. So, of course, this podcast is called Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. When you think of nostalgia, what do you think of? Or in your own words, how would you define the word nostalgia?
Oh my gosh. I guess nostalgia is stuff from your past or your youth that gives you a little bit of a warm, fuzzy feeling, maybe? Is that, I mean, that's the first thing that came to mind, just
Yeah,
something that you might want to go back to because it sparks a little happiness or comfort or yeah. I mean there's certain comedies and whatnot that I'll watch over and over. And the nice thing is my wife and I, we kind of like the same old comedies, whether it's like National Lampoon's Vacation or Three Amigos or Tootsie or things like that. So When Harry Met Sally, things that kind of you loved it when you first saw, and it kind of keeps the returns keep coming because there's something about them that endures. So yeah, I guess that would be my off the cuff answer to that question.
Nice.
awesome.
Nice. Great word to end on.
Uh,
I love
all right,
that.
guys, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah,
Of course, it was
absolutely.
a pleasure.
Yes, it absolutely was a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for agreeing to come on. This was a blast.
Yeah, totally.
Yes. Yeah. So, but yeah, thank you very much, Adam, for coming on. It means a lot, for what you've done over the years. Be a very part of our lives. So, what you ride for, and all those things over the years. It means a lot. Keep up the great
Thank
work of what
you.
you're
I
doing now,
appreciate it.
and
Yeah, and it's a
great
great
work.
appreciation for people who appreciate. I mean, like the fact that you guys really care. It's cool. It's and it really helped me kind of stroll down memory lane a little bit. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank
It means a
you.
lot.
Yes.
Thank
All right.
you.
Enjoy the rest of your day, Adam.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 It's goodbye from us as well. We absolutely enjoyed our time speaking with the wonderful Adam Peltzman. Keep on the lookout for more wonderful interviews coming your way. And as always, what do we say, Jake?
Keep nostalgia alive. Take care, everyone. See you next time. Take care. Bye.
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 Thank you for tuning in to another wonderful Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode. Be sure to follow Jake and the Happy Nostalgia team on social media, check out our website, and stream the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And as always, remember to keep nostalgia alive. Bye-bye.
This episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show is dedicated to TV executive, screenwriter, and producer Janice Burgess, best known for creating the Nick Jr. series The Backyardigans. Janice will be dearly missed by many.